Hey, Biltmore Church and other Western North Carolina friends and friends around the country, thanks for joining us today. I got a special treat that hopefully will be a great resource for you. What I'm going to try to do, or what I am going to do, is I'm going to introduce a friend of ours, longtime friend of mine, who is a licensed family counselor. His name is Kevin Wimbish, and just going to ask him some questions about kind of what's going on, how do we stay mentally healthy during this very unusual, unprecedented, to some degree, time in the life of our country. So let me tell you a little bit about Kevin real quick, make sure I don't miss anything. But again, experienced, licensed mental health professional. He specializes in anxiety. I know a lot of folks are struggling with that. Child and adolescent issues of family conflict. A couple of things. Kevin's got way more than I can introduce, but a couple of high points. He's got a Bachelor of Science in Human Development from UNC Greensboro. He's also got an MS in Marriage and Family Therapy at Auburn University. So, War Eagle from in 2004. His wife's name is Julie. They've got two kids, got a 12-year-old son as well as a 10-year-old daughter. And I've known Kevin actually ever since I moved here 11 years ago. Has done a great job in so many aspects. But today I want you to hear from him and hopefully be encouraged, be resourced a little bit. He was also the co-founder of Summit Wellness Centers here in the Asheville area, and hopefully it'll be a good resource to you today. So here we go. Kevin, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. How about you?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us today. I want to ask you a few questions, and you lay some knowledge on us. Obviously, this is a unusual time in the life of our country, really in the life of the world, as far as all the anxiety with COVID-19, schools closing, really not sure, what the next day is going to bring, financial stresses, all those kind of things. So, again, thanks for what you do, and thanks for joining us today. So, let me just kind of start off. What do you think are just some of the common emotional issues that people are experiencing right now?
With difficult times like this, times of uncertainty, confusion, that sort of thing, they really can turn up the volume on often what's already there. Turn up the volume on things like anxiety, on things like depression, compulsions, addictions, marital and family stress, financial concerns. So it's kind of like being in a sport, and just the pressure of the game can turn up the volume, reveal things that are inside that person. And I think that's a lot of what can happen during times like this.
Sure. I heard it said one time that the past, we can regret the past. The present, we're kind of trying to figure out what action to take. But what we fear and what causes so much anxiety oftentimes is the uncertainty of the future. It's like, how long is this going to last? Is this a week? Is this a month? Does the uncertainty also add to all of that?
I think so. I've never, of course, experienced this in my lifetime, and I think even in my parents' generation, they haven't experienced things like this. And so my minor in college was sociology, and so I'm interested from a sociological perspective as well. And just so many of our social structures right now seem to be in flux or changing.
Sure.
Can't count on them like we did a little bit ago, and we're unsure how to count on them. So those kinds of things can create a strong sense of unnervedness in all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, what are some practical steps that people can take to stay emotionally healthy during this time? Just some real practical things that you've seen have been helpful.
Sure. And some of these have been said elsewhere, in terms of announcements, briefings, that sort of thing. And I think we've gotten some good advice in that regard. Routines. And so of just establishing your own routines. People right now are asking me what's normal, and we kind of don't know, so right. I'm encouraging people, create some normals yourself, and lean on some normals you've already had. And so, making sure you're getting good sleep. Having a good sleep schedule, that sort of thing. Even though you might not technically have to get up when you did, still, maybe give yourself a little grace, but still have a sleep schedule. Set your alarm of when you're going to get up. I think that's very important. Having your quiet time, like you have been, or if you haven't been, now's a good time to start.
You've got some extra time.
That's right. Engaging with church online, that helps us, in terms of that engagement, that connection, that rhythm. Exercise, I know a lot of us like going to the gyms and me included. And so we have to get creative right now.
Yep.
And, but that's important, figuring out some exercise, some healthy things you can do. Movement, God has made us in a way that we need movement. And so trying to be diligent about that. Eating healthfully is going to be important as well. I think of right now, it's a lot of fundamentals, just let me think about, all right, winning this game, let me hunker down on the fundamentals.
Sure.
And then getting outside is huge as well. So I'd encourage people to be diligent about that. I'm seeing more people do that. So that's great.
That's good. Talking about the gym and how those are closed down, I was like,
Yeah.
probably like some stock in P90X right now because I'm looking for the tape and everything. It's like, how do those things do it? I got to do it in my living room. So,
Yes.
Kevin, you're a follower of Christ and strong believer, and so what are some scriptures that maybe you would encourage people to sit in and dwell in, and then also how does the gospel affect someone's emotional health? How can that affect especially affect your view on emotional health as well as what we can do? But first, how does it affect your view on emotional health, the gospel as well as scripture?
Sure. Well, I think of Colossians 1:17. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And like much of the Bible is mind blowing, and it's bigger than I can comprehend, and like that scripture is. But man, I think that's a good verse to marinate on. Is he's before all this, and in him all things hold together. And so in him all this is holding together. And even I think drill it down to ourselves. If we're struggling with anxiety or depression or any of the other things we mentioned, of just reminding ourselves that, man, in him my mental health is holding together. In him my family is holding together. In him my marriage is holding together. And that's how I think about mental health. I think of Jesus, of him as being the baseline of reality. He's our foundation. From him and through him and to him are all things. And so primarily that's how I think about mental health, is it all being held together in him. Another consideration I have around that is just anchoring our minds in him, of just reminding ourselves, to trust him. And it's like in Mark 9:23, he said, Jesus said to him, if I can, he said, all things are possible for one who believes. And immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. And I imagine that's going on for a lot of people right now. Lord, I believe, and help my unbelief, and so I'm a big believer of God knows what we're thinking with anyway. He knows what we're wrestling with anyway. Don't try to hide it and act like he doesn't know,
Right.
Take it to him for sure. Another way I think about the gospel and mental health, and because people ask me that in terms of, so I'm a licensed counselor, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, I'm a follower of Christ, ordained pastor, and they'll ask me kind of how does that all work together? And so I tell them I think of the scripture as a coffee filter, and I think of best practices, clinical practices, research, all that kind of stuff. And I'm gonna pour that stuff through a conservative biblical worldview,
Right.
theologically sound worldview, and what comes out is what I'm going to go with.
Sure.
So to me, a conservative Christian biblical worldview is the framework, and then looking at some of those other things.
I love the fact those two scriptures you picked, the Colossians 1:17, just about God's sovereignty. Somebody said God's sovereignty is the CPR of the Christian life. It's like, when you're panicked and your heart is stopped and it's just God is in control. He's on his throne. He's not trying to figure out what's going on. Is so encouraging. And then the one actually, the Mark passage about where the dad's praying for, once, can you help my son? And it's like, here's an area of unbelief that I have. I'm having a hard time believing you can do anything, but help me in this one area. I do believe, but help my unbelief. That's a phenomenal scripture there. Thanks for sharing it. What other resources? I know, like for us, we've just had to put everything online, just like this. Even our small groups are meeting online with Zoom. Our worship services, all that stuff. Kind of reflect a little bit about what do you think the value of like a digital community is right now?
I think it's very valuable. I mean, I love online church and online campus, and I think it's extremely valuable. You know, I was thinking through this, and I thought, man, 20 years ago, if this would have happened, who knows how we would have connected if would have been able to connect. You know, but I think of even in God's sovereignty of He gave us all these really smart people to create all these different platforms, and He's over all of this. And now we're at a time that even when we are needing to do the social distancing and all that, it's under God's purview, it's under His control, and He's provided opportunities for us to engage with each other. So I think it's huge.
25 years ago, you and I would have been talking on a landline and or sending carrier pigeons before that. So, absolutely. Anything, especially those who've experienced, because I know you've worked with a lot of addictions and a lot of people with very strong emotional issues they're working through. This has got to be incredibly, difficult. It's difficult for all of us. But any encouraging words or what they can find to kind of continue their journey in this. Our prayer is that months from now, we'll look back on this time, and say, look what God did. But in the middle of it, it's hard, and especially if you've already got some strong pulls and addictions, anything that can help them during this time continue their journey and their good journey.
Yeah, I'd love to start out by saying, we all have issues, and so of all just being mindful about that, and
Sure.
These principles can apply to all of us, and all of us realizing none of us are Superman or Superwoman, and to me, I like to talk with people about God's redemptive thread, and even through what seems to us to be the worst of things, God continually pulls out the best of things, and He flips it, and whether it's struggling with a compulsion or addiction or anxiety, depression, or even if we might not be struggling as much right now, us just being mindful of that. Focus on the Family has some great resources right now. There's a part you can click at the top right there, and it's just resources that can help people during this time. Family resources, marital resources, that sort of thing.
Cool.
I'd encourage everybody to engage with what Biltmore's, you guys are doing a great job in terms of producing content. Julie was telling me about a basketball shooting contest with the students. You guys are doing a great job with that, of just keeping people connected. I'd encourage folks who are wrestling with compulsions, addictions right during this time and maybe feeling the stress, kind of turn up the volume on that. And I encourage all of us in this regard to really think about the Lord's Prayer and really focus in on that part of, give us this day our daily bread.
It's one day at a time.
Yeah, one day at a time. Yeah. And because that's what anxiety does. It just starts going, what if, and for any folks who've wrestled with anxiety, and this has been part of my journey too, of we can trade the what is with the what ifs, and what we can miss the beauty of what God is doing in the moment for the fear of all this other stuff that might happen, and it might not ever happen, and we've missed the moment. So
that's good.
One day at a time. Jesus, be manna for me today, and tomorrow I'm gonna get back up and ask you again, and the next day I will too.
That's good. Tomorrow has enough trouble of its own.
That's right. Yeah,
he said so. That's good. Yes. All right. Well, Kevin, hey, you've been invaluable today. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you're super busy, but thanks for all you do. Thanks for your friendship to our Biltmore Church, as well as today, just giving us some good and godly counsel. Appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Big time.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Bye.